Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. I was so excited to have an opportunity to speak to my guest today. And the reason I was so excited about this is that we share a belief about how to best develop professional positive relationships with teachers. And that is not to leave them alone, but to observe them more frequently and to be in the classrooms and see what they're doing. So my guest today is Craig Randall. Craig is the developer and author of Trust-Based Observations. Craig has spent the last 30 years plus in education working as a counselor, coach, teacher, and principal. Craig spends the majority of his time training school leaders all over the globe in the trust-based observation system. He works with leaders, training TBO mastery, and transforming the world of teacher observations to a model of trust and support that fosters growth mindsets, teaching innovation, and a school-wide culture of trust. In addition, Craig speaks at conferences. He's working on a follow-up book and hosts the 20 Minutes of Learning Brilliance, On the Road with Trust-Based Observations, a podcast where he and some of the amazing teachers he observed engage in meaningful dialogue about what makes good teaching and learning. I think this is a good one for everybody. I know you'll enjoy it. Craig, it is wonderful to see you in quote unquote person, to have this chat, to talk about trust-based observations and what your experience has been in developing better relationships with teachers to help make them better. So welcome.
Thanks. I appreciate being here. It was great for us. We've been able to chat a bit in the last month, I guess. And so now we actually get to see each other for the first time, which is always nice.
It's always nice. And the other thing that we did, which made it exciting for me to have this conversation, is that we swapped books. And we got to know each other.
Mine's downstairs, but yeah, I read one. We're ready to start the second one.
Well, you'll see after you read those books just how much we have in common. Yeah. And so that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. But again, your book is called Trust-Based Observations. What's kind of the thesis of your book and how did you get to write that book?
Look, I'm not sure I knew all of it before I started writing it. But it developed organically over time, starting with my supervision class, where the man who's my mentor said you need to be in classes every day, supporting teachers, observing them, helping them grow, asking them what they were doing that worked to help students learn, asking them what they might do differently, and focusing on strengths. It started with that, and it built from that, really without knowing I was building anything, until somebody said, Craig, you need to protect your work. And I said, what are you talking about, naively? And he said, you created something here. I thought, wow, thanks. And then I thought I should present at a conference, and it went really well. Gosh, maybe I should write an article. And it got accepted. And then that led to writing a book. But the thesis really is teacher observations right now, research shows, are not improving teaching and learning. It shows maybe worse than that. It's causing harm. It lowers teachers' sense of self-efficacy, and it causes teachers to play it safe and not take risks trying new practice. If we want collective teacher efficacy, we certainly can't be doing something with observation that's lowering self-efficacy. So really, just through 9 core areas of practice, we do a continuous series of observations where we focus on strengths. We ask teachers those 2 questions, and we really work to build relational trust with our teachers so they know we can come into their classroom, observe them, see them trying something new, and even though it's unlikely, have that thing they're trying not go well, be a disaster, a train wreck. But as opposed to traditional observations where they'd be freaking out over that, they're not worried because they know we're going to say, Gene, I love it that you are trying something new. And when that happens, what will teachers do? they will persist in trying new things. And when we created those psychologically safe spaces, they try new things. They're more open to suggestions, and they improve teaching and learning for our kids, which is our most important job.
Well, let's back up a little bit because, anytime somebody reads something or listens to something,
Yeah,
they don't recognize the bad things that they're doing, or not, I don't want to say bad things, but not maybe really effective things. So can you talked about the many of the observations and evaluations that we're doing now that aren't effective. What are some of the characteristics? What are some of the things that are occurring that are counterproductive that the trust-based observations countered?
sure. Well, the first and foremost, research shows we're rating pedagogy. I mean, Danielson, Marzano, so 5D, all of them, they rate pedagogy and they rate an inordinately large number of areas of indicators of practice. If you were to look at each one of those indicators on their own, you'd say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. We ought to score teachers on that so they can get better. But the research shows as soon as I started to grade your pedagogy, then teachers feel threatened and they play it safe. Relational trust diminishes and they don't take risks. So the very first thing that we do is we don't rate pedagogy. One of the other things that research, like from the New Teachers Project, says is that any type of template that we're going to use, it has to be 10 or less indicators. Otherwise, we lose the forest through the trees and it becomes a tick box exercise instead of really seeing the art and craft of teaching. And I know you and I both have heard this as well as any listener out there, the dog and pony show. And it's true. Teachers put on lessons when they're being observed to get those boxes ticked so they can put it in the rearview mirror. And then we're having fake conversations about fake practice. So because of the ratings, but also because of the number of indicators. So we just have 9 core areas of pedagogy in line with that. Like Danielson has 76, Marzano has 60, University of Washington Self-ID has 37. And you just can't see it all. And we don't also, if something's not existing, like many of those models, now I have to, as a teacher, prove that no, I actually do that. And I have to spend my valuable time that could be spent prepping lessons on demonstrating to you why we do that. If something's not there, we say the absence of is not a negative. I mean, potentially over time, it might be an area to work on, but we also focus diligently on looking at it from a strengths-based model. Like the clinical model of supervision out of Harvard, like the first modern pre-observation conference, observation, post-observation conference said, the person being observed is in an incredibly vulnerable position. This is pre-rubrics, and they're saying that. And they said, we have to work to build trusting relationships with them. And they said, one of the most important ways to do that is by focusing on strengths. And so we do, we focus on strengths. And if I don't rate something, it can be a strength. It might not be a high strength, but it's a strength. So let's say for example, I saw somebody formatively assessing, but they were maybe doing it in that traditional asking kids, and those same 7 kids raise their hand, and then they're assuming that everyone knows it, right? Which is not great practice. Yet it's formative assessment. And if I see it at one level and I share that I saw it, but I don't put a score on it, then that works. It's easier for me to build you up as opposed to if I say, oh, well, no, it's only at that level. Then you get defensive and you don't want to work on things.
So you used the term relational trust several
Yeah.
times now. So one of the things that is one of the buzzwords, and no buzzwords on this podcast, is relationships.
Love you.
Relationships so far. Can you talk about that a little
Yeah.
bit about developing relationships and and this may sound counterproductive, it may sound cold, but what's the goal of developing that relationship when you're working with a teacher?
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'm going to go back to you saying no buzzwords and stuff because I think that's a really important thing. And I was just presenting at a conference last week, and one of my slides in the presentation shows like 5 different quotes that are about trust, like the ones you'll see on LinkedIn or whatever, or relationship. And you read these little quotes and you're like, yeah, they drive me crazy because they're just words. They don't like, what does any of that mean without this? And this is key. How? How do you build relationships? how do you build trust, right? And so trust takes time. Relationships take time. Brene Brown talks about the connection between vulnerability, risk taking, and trust. She says vulnerability isn't a bad thing. If it's too high, oftentimes that's a good protection mechanism that's saying something's wrong. And the way we're doing it now is making teachers feel super vulnerable. She says the way you lower sense of vulnerability, which then gets people more willing to embrace risk taking and trying new things, is by building trust. And she has a great analogy. If you think about a jar, that because trust takes time, it's putting a marble and a time into a jar. You want to fill that jar up. And so what we do is we do a whole series of hows, actions to build trust. Like that's what our reflective conversation is all about. I don't want to go on too long, but we'll like the very first trust marble is we have the reflective conversation in the teacher's room because they feel safer in their room. We ask permission to have the conversation when we get there. That's a marble. We sit beside you, not across from you, because psychological research on hierarchy in the workplace says when we sit across from you, it magnifies that difference. They feel safe. We show the form to them. We start by asking questions instead of telling. We tell them that part that I said earlier about when you come into your room, what the goal of trust-based observation is. We take all these specific actions that build trust, that build relationship, and we take our time. We don't offer a suggestion the first or second or even third time. There's exceptions because that jar's not full. So those are some of the things that build trust.
So you're alluding to something that we talked about before we started recording, and it's something in your book, and that is the fact that when you are training administrators in this trust-based observation manner of working with teachers, is that it may be that you have observed a teacher 4 times before there's any sort of suggestions. And I think I like that as a specific suggestion versus it's going to take time,
Yeah.
because you always say it's going to take time to develop relationships. Well, it's not only time, but there are activities within that time frame. And for you, it is these observations. Tell
They're
us
the
a little.
reflective conversations, more specific.
So there's no reflective conversations until after the 4 visits.
No, so we have an observation and we have a reflective conversation. And we
Okay.
start the reflective conversation in their room by saying, what were you doing to help students learn? And if you had the chance to do it again, what might you do differently? And then we tell them the goal of trust-based observations. And then we observe what we saw. We share the evidence. But as opposed to like the compliment sandwich or the 2 stars on the wish or the noticings and wonderings or the glows and grows.
Yeah.
We don't offer a suggestion. No, if you're like a brand new teacher in your classroom management to train rec, obviously we don't wait. They need help right away. But for everyone else, we're filling that. And by having those conversations, those first 3, 4 visits, that's filling that jar. Can I actually tell you how that came to be the 4th visit?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
My very first year as an assistant principal, I didn't know anything about what I was doing other than how to do observations because we practiced it in my supervision class. And I'm at an international school in Korea and I'm doing these conversations and it's so transformatively different than people's experience with observations that teachers old and new are saying, you're the best principal I ever had. I didn't know anything about what I was doing except this one tiny little area, observations, although it's not a tiny area. And so I didn't give suggestive feedback because I thought, wow, what if I give a suggestion and you're good at it, but I haven't seen you do it yet, right? That's just something new. I knew that was wrong. But really the bigger reason was I knew the teachers were loving me and I was afraid if I gave conversations, they wouldn't like me anymore. And something really fascinating happened. It didn't dawn on me until years later, but the 3rd and 4th round, well over half the teachers at the end of the conversation, as I was getting up to leave, would say, okay, but what can I get better at? And later on, when I realized I'd actually accidentally been developing this thing, I realized that was trust. And like using that Brene Brown speak, that was my filling the jar. And so that's how we came to the 4th round.
Because they do want to know.
If they
teachers do
feel
want to know.
safe, if they feel
Yeah.
like they're in a psychologically safe space.
Yeah. Yeah.
If they don't, then they're going to be cautious and resist it.
So oh man, I have so many questions to ask you, Craig. I'm gonna withhold a little bit. So you suggest 20-minute observations
Yep.
and you don't notify the teacher before you're coming.
Which can I throw this in before you ask your
Oh
question?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
What
Once teachers feel the strength based, I care about you nature of the reflective conversation, they love that they're unannounced. They love that they're unannounced because they don't have to fake prepare something and they don't have to worry about it. Just want to throw that in.
Yeah, no, I think you have to have that level, whether it's an administrator, instructional coach, whomever, they have to be able to see the teachers in their natural state, to see what's going on.
Complete waste of time otherwise.
So you did the 20 minutes and you don't have do you ever do any sort of
Nope.
observation with a pre-conference?
No. Then it's
Yeah.
not going to be real teaching. I mean, it's human nature. If we do it, you're going to change what you do if I know when you're going to be there. And then we have the conversation the next day.
Okay. So I don't debate with guests, but here is a view. Here is something that I'm going to throw out. And maybe it's a little bit ahead of time, but I think we've laid a little bit of the groundwork in that you're not looking at 70 checkpoints or 35 checkpoints. You're looking at 9 areas,
9 core
Okay.
areas of practice.
9 core areas of practice. Okay. And I've been in with a teacher and had a couple observations. And these are a couple core areas where I see that this teacher might improve. And so how do you facilitate the improvement if we don't have an observation focusing on, like, Craig, I want you to come in. I love you. I want you to come in and see how I've improved on this particular piece.
One, if anybody asks, I'll always come in. So just to be clear, if you ask, I'll always. So it's not a pre-observation conference, but if you want me to come in and watch you, for sure. Let's talk about then what happens when we're ready to offer a suggestion. So my lens is always, which one of those 9 areas in a differentiated way for each teacher, if I help that teacher, would make the biggest improvement in teaching and learning for that teacher. And maybe I'll differentiate this a little bit from the coaching. With a traditional coaching model, it's usually what does the teacher want to work on? And I have no issue with that.
Craig, you see me stop. I do not believe in that at all. Okay.
You
And
and
the
I are in the
reason
same
that-
thing. But like a
let-
gym
yeah,
night or a lot of that. Okay. So good.
Yeah.
We'll put that aside because we're
we'll
on the
put that
same thing.
aside. Okay.
Okay. So, all right. We'll virtual fist bump over that one. And so, and I always say every week when I'm training a school, I learn something new because some trainee says, "Hey, Craig, what about this?" So my point to that is I'm the guy that developed trust-based observations, and I have tons of blind spots on trust-based observations. So what we do is we look at those 9 areas, and because teachers might not realize what those blind spots are, we notice which one it is. So this is where I think we really differentiate from a traditional observation model, because oftentimes it's like, hey, I'd like you to work on your descriptive progress feedback. And here's an article at best, which we would never say to a 3rd grader, hey, those multiplication facts need work. Here's a times table. I'll see you in a month. Right? We would never do that. So we want to model what we want teachers to do with students. So then we have our reflective conversation at that 4th round. Let's just as an example, like normal. And at the very end, then it's time for the suggestion. This very first part is really key. We ask permission to offer the suggestion. So I'm going to say, Gene, I have a suggestion on the working memory, and especially the addition of reflection and processing activities. Would you like to hear? I could tell you that I want to work on that, and you would say yes, but you're going to be strategically compliant because no one really likes to be told what to do. But just by semantically changing and asking permission, you feel like you have choice and you're way more willing to engage with me. And people say, what if they say no? I had one person in my career say no, and she just wasn't ready yet. 3 times later, she was. So they'd say yes. And so then now, one area on the form, Gene, that's really also different with trust-based observations is it's hyperlinked to professional development resource area for each one of the 9 areas of pedagogy. So let's say it was that reflection and processing activities. So I'm probably going to have a hard copy of this, but have the electronic copy first. And we have this one document on that has 78 different activities that could be these 1 to 2 minute processing activities. And I'm going to say, Jane, let's look at this list. Like if you were going to pick 6 or 8 of those that you really resonated with you, what would they be? Let's highlight those. So, Gene, if we were going to start to put this into practice and you were just going to do it just one of your classes, which one would you want to do? Great. Let's pull up that lesson for tomorrow. Looking at that lesson, do you think there's any natural breaks that align with the cognitive load capacity of your kids? Or close to that? Okay. At that first one, which one of those 6 do you think you'd like to put in there? Okay, let's write that one down. So we go all the way through that. Then we're going to say, so Gene, let's do this tomorrow. There's 4 ways we can do this. And I know you disagree on the first one. It doesn't really happen, though. It's more just to throw out there so they have a feeling of choice. But I know this because we talked before. But we say, would you like me to model it for you? Would you like to co-teach it? Would you like to teach it and have me give you feedback? And it can either be suggested feedback in the moment or later. Or would you like to try it on your own and tell me about it later? But if you try it on your own, sometimes when we do it, it gets worse before it gets better. That's called an implementation dip. And if that happens, we're notorious for just throwing it away and going back to what we were going to do. But remember, I'm going to be back a month later. So if that happens, you have to tell me. People almost always choose do it and give me feedback. Sometimes I'll choose co-teaching. I haven't ever had anybody actually have me model it yet. So then the next day I go in and observe you and I'm looking, but more just on this one area, right? And then we have another conversation and I say, well, with that area, what would you like to keep working on in that area? And here's the most important question. What can I do to support you so by the next time I come in, that's built regularly into your practice? So what have I done? In a low stakes, non-threatening way, I've set the expectation that now we're going to do that. And of course, I will provide whatever help or have my coach provide whatever help.
Two things, you talked about giving them a choice, whether they want a suggestion. I geek out so much when I'm working with teachers and I get so excited about, gosh, if they just did this one little thing. I have a saying that I'll tell them, Craig, and if you like it, smile and say, Gene, I like that. And if you don't like it, just smile. And it's kind of the same thing.
You're throwing choice in there in a subtle way.
You're throwing choice in there in a subtle way. And it's getting them to think about, no, I may not do it that way, but I get why you think it might be valuable. So it's a way to do it. And Craig, I'm going to tell you, I'm laughing because I think we have a distinction without a difference, possibly. Okay. And that is you don't do a pre-observation.
Yeah.
But after you just described that reflective conversation,
yeah,
and we talked about it, and I'm coming back tomorrow, that's a pre-observation. And it's not important. It's not important what you call it, but it's important that, like you said, that there's a focus. We've talked about how to get better. And when I come back, and support, and we're going to provide this. And I know, like you said earlier, I know this is new. Thank you for trying it. Thank you for trying this because it's the first time you're doing it possibly, and don't expect it to be perfect.
No, and oftentimes it goes way better than they think it does, but they have to know the worst case scenario can happen and they're still going to be supported.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about those nine components, and you can find them in your book. Do you know them off the top of your head, the 9 components that you look at?
Yeah, I do. And also you can go to the website, trustbase.com, and there's a link that says observation form, and then you can have the form sent to you so you can download it. Yes, of course I know them. The first is learning targets. And we always say it doesn't matter what your style of school is. It can be learning intention, learning objective. It can be essential question. By the way, and there's 8 core elements that research says are tied to that. I'm not going to go into all those. But we also do a student interview to ask about the learning. So we ask the students not students, but a student or perhaps 2, what are you supposed to be learning? What is the learning target? How does it have value in the real world? And then we kind of ask that meta question, how do you know when you've learned it? So that's the first one. The second one is rapport and relationship, teacher-student rapport and relationship. The third one is classroom and behavior management. The next one is cooperative learning. The next one is working memory, cognitive load capacity. The next one is questioning slash higher order thinking skills. The next one, these two kind of go together, are checks for understanding or formative assessment and descriptive progress feedback. The last one is differentiation, specific differentiation. There's a 10th area that's not pedagogy, though. There's really 8 different learning principles, main ways that we help students learn: lecture, direct instruction, the use of audio visual, demonstration and modeling, reading, class discussion, pair or team discussion, learning by doing, and teaching others. And so in the working memory table, we timestamp activities. And then at the end, and then we put them down on the bottom. And we want people to spend the majority of their time in those bottom ones because they're more actively involved in research that's higher learning. And so when the minutes are 11 or more, in other words, the majority of the lesson, we write the total minutes down to celebrate that to get them to do more. So that's the 9 areas plus the bonus.
Now, would those 9 areas change from school to school where you work?
So generally speaking, I would say no. Yet we always just say we're willing to work with you on whatever and adjust. And so we also oftentimes people do the same things, but they have different terminology. So we always say change the terminology, but also say the research says that you can have up to 10, like from the New Teachers Project. And so we have 9 areas. And so we will have schools that will add a 10th area. For example, we've worked on a number of special needs schools and they have more teaching assistants than teachers. So they'll add a 10th one, effective collaboration between teacher and teacher assistant. Or we've had some faith-based schools like Catholic schools or whatever, where they'll add one like Catholic values or whatever. And we're open to people doing whatever they want. And if somebody felt like this didn't work for them, I'm just saying, well, let's chat about it. One of the things I'll say though is we do have that toolbox possibilities, that clickable professional development resource. So we just always say, if you want to change something, we would really encourage you to create your own toolbox that works the same way.
Okay. How do those 9 areas, when a school adopts those 9 areas, maybe wholesale, they take
Yep.
those,
Yep.
and then we want to develop another part of your book that I think that I really agreed with, that I think is effective, is that the professional development isn't just general. It's going to be specific to the staff based on needs, based on assessments, based on taking a look at data, however they have, whatever their process is for taking a look at their needs, so that it's a conclusion that decision has been made collaboratively in a collaborative fashion with the staff. So do all of those, does the PD, will it dovetail nicely with those 9 components
So yeah, I got you. So what
Okay.
I'll say is we're always working on supporting you in 2 ways. One, in a differentiated way, like we just talked about with each teacher, like which one of those 9 areas. But then one of the things that starts to happen is when we're in classes as frequently as we are, I know the book says it's one thing, we've modified it now. We want to see you once every 3 to 4 weeks. So as I start to see all my teachers so much more, I really know who my in-house experts are. So starting in year 2, really, or at the end of year 1, we tap into those in-house experts. And I'll say, even though there's 9 areas, we combine relationships and behavior management, and we combine formative assessment, descriptive progress feedback, because those just go together. So for those 7 areas, we'll ask people, hey, we really want to build mastery in those areas. We want to offer monthly professional development in each particular area, and we want you or you and someone else to co-facilitate towards building mastery in that area. We have a list of what mastery in each one of those areas is. And when you talk about professional development and things people complain about, they complain about one size fits all. They complain about one-off PD, and they complain about teachers not having autonomy or choice. So at the beginning of the 2nd year, we let the teachers self-rate on those areas of pedagogy and then choose an annual goal for whichever one of those 7 areas they want to work on. And then they get to participate in those once a month meetings in whichever area they want to grow on. And we've added an additional question is, talk to me about your progress on your annual goal. So it keeps it front of mind. And then over years, you get, not that you can't have quick little general beginning unpacking of each of the areas. But year over year, you can build yourself up in all of those areas over time. We actually even facilitate different leaders every year because the people that are training don't get to be learners themselves, like other than being a teacher. And so at the end of the first year of doing that, we'll ask the people that have been facilitating it, who's your new star? And then we'll have them facilitate it the next year. So we're always changing who the facilitators are. So then those people can be learners and it just cycles like. And so that's how we grow over time, everyone.
So you mentioned in this professional development process where they like groups, maybe somebody looking on the same things. Is that what you described in the book as the PDC versus the PLC?
I
Where
do. And I mean, the professional development communities, and the reason, like, PLCs have changed meaning so much over the year. I think it meant a lot of things. And now I think people generally think of it as that before looking at data style is what I think most people think. And so just to alleviate confusion, I just used a different phrase called professional development communities.
So it's very possible that PDC, professional development community, could be across grade level spans. It could be across
Oh,
disciplines.
no, it's for sure it is. So,
Yeah,
and like,
yeah.
I could have four fourth grade teachers each choose a different area, and each one is working on that one for the year. Or if they wanted to as a team, all choose to work on that one that's facilitated by somebody. They can do it. We don't, it's autonomy. As individuals or a team, we want you to choose in that one area because it's important to let them have choice. And because I already know I do get to work with you on the area that I personally think is the one that's going to have best impact, right? And that can change over the course of a year as I see growth too.
Boy, I hope so. I hope it doesn't take a year or two.
Oh, yeah, but some
So,
are longer,
yeah,
some are shorter, right? But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, but I think the reason that I said that somewhat facetiously is that's another thing we see I don't even know how to describe in other coaching models is that there's something that if I've seen you teach 3 times, Craig, and now
Yep.
there's time for a suggestion, and then we talk about how you're going to do it. If you're a competent teacher, it's not going to take, you're going to be able to improve greatly between day 2 and day 3.
And there's a variety, right? So I've got my
Yes,
stronger, my middle, and my weaker teachers, and some are going to take longer or shorter. You differentiate, we're differentiating, just like we would want
yes,
teachers to do with students, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what is the biggest, number one, why do people call you? Okay. What are they experiencing? And then what's the biggest things that administrators have to give up as they begin this work?
Good question. So I'll say, look, this is transformatively different than everything else that's out there. And change, people change at different rates, right? Malcolm Gladwell on Tipping Point talks about the 5 stages. There's the innovators, the early adopters, the early majority, late majority, and laggards. I always say I never want a laggard to do trust-based observation. But we're still at a point where the people that reach out to us are the innovators or the early adopters. So they're the people that sometimes they'll just see a social media post and it resonates. Sometimes they'll get the book, read the first 3 chapters and go, oh, we need to do that. And then there's the second group right behind that. It's like, yeah, oh, you did it? Okay, we'll do it too. Really, right now, we're mostly in that stage because we're new. So those are the people that are reaching out mostly, and we hope and believe we'll get to other stages down the road. So in terms of what you have to give up, this is what I'll say. Besides like just ensuring safety to school, my belief is our number one job as school leaders is to improve the quality of teaching and learning on our building in order to better prepare our students to become successful adults. And so then the question becomes how? And so to me, it's trust-based observations is the best way to improve teaching and learning. So in terms of giving up something, I think I'm going to frame that as how do I choose to spend my time? And so we all know there's the urgent. We all know there's all these things that come up and take our time, and those are always going to persist. What I'll say is, as soon as I start to practice and experience trust-based observations, like, because I spend my time training schools, as you know. And so as soon as they start to see the teacher reactions, because the teachers respond so differently, they're so grateful to have strengths shared with them because it just doesn't feel that way. And they also, number one thing they'll say after we do a round is, I'm already thinking about what to get better at without even saying anything. So as soon as a leader your first experiences are your teacher's feeling like this and your teacher's thinking what to do, all of a sudden, observations that which have been a drudgery, which I didn't necessarily want to do, now start to feel joyful. So all of a sudden, it's easier to do it because now I enjoy it. So now I see, okay, how do I prioritize time? So one, it depends on what your load is, but let's just say it's going to be 40 to 80 minutes a day, depending on the day of the week that you're doing it. For some of us, we definitely have to look at our schedules and we have to say, are there things that are on my schedule that aren't as important or that can be more clerical and handed to somebody else or that I have to put on the back burner? And do I have to tell my office manager, next 20 minutes I'm in class, I'm not to be disturbed unless the building's on fire? Do we have to do those kind of things? For sure. So is it taking something off? I mean, yeah, but I think you experience the joy of it, so it becomes easier to do it.
All
I know
right.
it sounds strange to
Well,
think of that as an observation being joyful, but it really is.
it really is. Like you say, it is the job, the school's job is teaching and learning, and administrator's job is to support that. So support people in getting better. Craig, do you have any questions for me?
Well, I mean, we've already asked some questions of each other, and I think as I finish reading your second book, I'm probably going to have a ton more questions for you. But what I'll say, Gene, is it's always nice to come across people that, one, I really appreciated that you were questioning me before, when we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and the things that you were like not quite sure on. You were probing and digging, and I'm always grateful for people that question it and ask it because it helps me to refine my own thinking. And so I don't want to say more than questions at the moment. I'm grateful. I'm grateful for you doing that. And I'm grateful for the time. And I think as I read your book, I'm probably going to have the same kind of questions to come back at you with in a positive way, of course.
Well, it's been a pleasure. And just like you said, I think we talked at least for a half hour, and it gave me more context when I read your book, and I appreciated it. And then every time, it's just like trust-based observations. Every time there's an encounter, the
It builds
relationship,
relationship.
you build relationships. So, Craig, it's been a joy. Anything you like to promote? Where can people find you on
So, I mean,
social media?
obviously, you can go to Amazon and get the book,
Okay.
Trust-Based Observations. My website is trustbased.com. So anything there, there's more information. And I'll tell you, one of the cool things is when I'm on the road observing teachers, and I really feel like I observe more teachers through the lens of observation than any human being. And I will see 20 minutes of teaching brilliance regularly. And around a year and a half ago, it dawned on me, I need to share that out. So I actually interview these teachers and we talk shop about what we saw so other teachers can learn. So I also have my own podcast called 20 Minutes of Teaching Brilliance on the road with trust-based observations. So if anybody's interested in that, feel free to give it a listen.
All right, great. And all that information will be in the show notes. Craig, a joy. Thanks for being on Better Teaching, all these stuff that works.
A joy for me too, Gene. Thank you so much for having me on.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at G Tavernetti, on Twitter, X, at G Tavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused Adaptable Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles. Talk to you soon.